Is this on now? Wonderful, wonderful. My name is Gene Lefebvre. I'm one of the worship leaders this morning. I want to welcome everyone here to the service, especially those of you who may be visitors with us. We'd love to have you stay at least long enough to come and have a cup of coffee and a donut or whatever you can grab from back there. And we do have some announcements we'll go with this morning. One of those, it's Father's Day, isn't it? How could I forget? How many of you are fathers? Hold up your hands. Now we do the serious stuff. How many of you are grandfathers? How many of you are great-grandfathers? You think it's an adjective, but... Well, that deserves some applause. One of the members of our church is on special duty this week. He's up in the mountains where the UCC camp provides a great experience for young people. And come and explain to people what he's doing.
Hubert isn't with us today because he's up at the UCC camp getting things ready. The kids arrive later this afternoon. He really feels bad he can't be here physically, but he's here in phone spirit. So let me put him on the microphone over here. All right. Hubert, are you ready to talk? Go ahead.
Put him on speaker.
Hang on a second. Let me put you on. Hang on a second. I have to put you on speaker. These people know better what to do than I do. Thank goodness. So how do I put them on the speaker?
The upper right-hand thing that has a little speaker on it.
Upper right-hand thing. I'm not seeing it. I got it. Are you ready?
I am.
Go ahead.
Hi, everybody. Speaking to you tonight, currently from a dollar store in Prescott Valley, buying supplies. I definitely do miss seeing all your faces today, but I'll be back next week for our last week, and I just wanted to say hi to everybody, and I miss you, and wish us a happy camp.
Happy camp. Thanks, Hubert. I'll talk to you later.
Tell Matt Curry his mom says hi.
Tell Matt that his mom says hi.
That's great work that Hubert and the others are doing with young people. It makes a big difference for them. Something special is happening next week as well. We're having a meal to celebrate something that's called July Sabbath. And I think we'll just leave something by the door that's a symbol of Shadow Rock Church and a Bible and a little note saying, this is it. Because after this next Sunday, we'll be gone for a while, for the month of July. So one of the things that makes this church unique is that we take off. This church is known throughout the country as that crazy church that takes off a whole month on a vacation altogether. And I think they have the image of us all going to the same place together in July. No, we don't want that. But we will be, seriously, we'll be gone during July. And we do encourage you to go to another church of worship and see how they're doing things. That church that you've been passing by and wondering what's going on in there. Come, take your opportunity on a Sunday and check it out. And this evening we have a very special kind of program that our church has been preparing for a while, which has to do with the support of migrants. The timing on this issue is very interesting. Suddenly it's a big, explosive national interest in this subject matter. And Ken is going to talk about, for a moment, about what he might expect from you. Where are you, Ken? Here he is. Here he comes.
Thank you, Reverend Gene. Welcome, everyone. This evening at 6 p.m. at Central United Methodist Church, we will be having a rally, Justice for Migrant Families. This is something that we planned several months ago, very much keeping in mind Marco Tullio Cos, who was deported, taken away from his family, Ishmael Delgado, 10 days before his wedding, taken away from his family. And so we thought, since the 17th is our usual time every month that we go to the ICE office to make a statement, because Father's Day fell on the 17th, we decided to do an enhanced show of our support and solidarity for families that have been impacted by deportation. So 6 o'clock tonight at Central United Methodist, and then at the end of that rally, we will go into our second action, which will be to go from the church to the ICE office, which is about a block away, and we will be having a candle light vigil there, as well as carrying these pieces of construction fence with these pinwheels in them. A blue pinwheel is the national symbol for child abuse prevention. And we are saying that our government sponsoring, justifying their actions of child abuse by taking children away is something that does not represent us as people of faith or as United States citizens of conscience. This does not represent us, and so we are wanting to make that loud and clear. So you can keep your pinwheel, or throughout the service or at the end of the service, take your pinwheel and take the straw part and weave it into the fence here. There are two other sections like this that are being put together down in the Kreider Center, and families, our sanctuary families, are working on those for us right now, and we'll take those with us tonight. All those who are interested in going tonight, if I'll say about 10, 15 minutes at the end of our service, if you'll meet me in the multipurpose room, would like to discuss with you any details that are questions that you have. So thank you.
You're going to practice the waving of the windmills?
Here, everybody,
there it
hold
goes.
up your windmill.
You gotta blow it directly on it like this. The spirit is blowing.
Spirit moves Shadow Rock once again. We continue our worship with our call to worship.
Shout for joy to the Lord, all the earth. Come before God with joyful songs. Know that the Lord is God. It is she who makes us, and we are hers. We are hers. We are the sheep of her pasture.
That song reminds me of Woodstock. I don't know if you remember, but one of the sayings from the movie, are there any children here this morning? Okay, just one? I'll keep it real simple. Elect me President of the United States and I'll declare childhood disease. Do you remember that one? Sorry. This is time for celebrations of our ministry and the impact that we have. This is the time to share your celebrations of our lives, your birthdays, anniversaries, words of kindness, works of peace, and also of justice. And today, just to do something a little bit different, I know we always start over there and we come around this way, but if you have a celebration today, we're going to start over on this side, and we're going to work that way because it is the coming Sabbath soon, so we're just going to do things a little different. Over here, Karen and Scott.
Good morning, everybody. We're Karen and Scott Richter, and we're celebrating 1 month early our 25th wedding anniversary. So stay and help us eat a lot of cake. So big cake, come hungry to coffee chat. Also celebrating that I had a great crowd to watch I'm Not Your Negro Monday evening. So thanks to everybody who came to watch the movie with me. And celebrating another Shadow Rocker at camp. Our oldest son, Galen, is a counselor this year. And
Yay.
Martha's leaving this afternoon for camp.
Thank you. Michael, back here. I know it's confusing.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Kelly Rhodes,
Hi, Tony.
and I just want to celebrate somebody who's incredibly special. I wanted to lift him up today because it is Father's Day. His name is Vinny, and he's become a father figure to me. Thanks.
Thank you. Bert?
I'm Bert Ruby. I am standing up to celebrate that our youngest granddaughter is graduating from middle school this week. Her name is Sarah Walkup.
Lois?
Many of you saw the notice this week that came out that said Connie Beaupre, who has been a longtime member of our congregation, died this week. And we are going to help their family as part of our family with the celebration of life. The celebration will be on Friday at 11 o'clock in the sanctuary. And we are the church, that's all of us, the family. We're going to help out the Beaupre family by bringing salads, desserts, and fruit. So I will be in the parlor afterward, and I would love to know that you're going to help, and then we can figure out all together what we need to do to be ready for the lunch on Friday after the service. Lunch will be at 12 o'clock, and thanks so much for all of you. I've talked with Chris. He's very touched by the outreach he's had from the church, and we look forward to seeing you on Friday.
Thank you.
Red. Kendra Merritt, and first I want to start off by saying Happy Father's Day to all the fathers and grandfathers and everything, and just to say that I love my dad so much, and he's probably about one of the best men that I've ever been graced to have in my life, and I love you. Not to end on a sad note, because I know there's happy notes coming. My aunt went into the hospital on Thursday, and with a kidney stone turned into a kidney infection, turned into a bladder infection, turned into septicemia. She now has pneumonia and COPD, and she's intubated and unconscious in the hospital right now. So if everybody could send some really good, loving thoughts to her, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Will do. Alice-Ann, do you have a microphone? Okay, Ed? Oh, wait, we'll go back down here to Doug, sorry.
Hi, Doug Merritt. Have two celebrations. One, like thank Ken again. Yesterday, he performed the wedding ceremony for my son and Chris. And it was in the house, and it was busy. They chose the 16th of June because his grandparents were married on the 16th of June in 1946, and they just celebrated their 72nd wedding anniversary.
Wow. Thank you. Mickey?
Hi, Mickey Tucker. Couple things. One, this is kind of a really different Father's Day. Jessie got to meet her birth father, so it's been really wonderful. And she had a truly wonderful experience doing that, and he's beautiful, just like her. I can see her in his face, so that was really special too. And it's been wonderful to have Herb celebrate with the girls for Father's Day and with our son, Brian, too. That's been pretty special. And then in July, when church isn't here, Herb and Brian are going to create a special dinner for a candidate fundraiser. So if you're lucky enough to get an invitation, you're lucky enough. So we'll see. If you're interested, let me know, but it's going to be a really fantastic meal. I'm pretty excited about it. Brian went crazy last night deciding on changing all the menu. So Herb went, sure. But it should be fun, so I look forward to that happening too.
Thank you.
Good morning. It's good to be back after 2 cool weeks up in Washington with the girls. I went up to help Alyssa get packed to move to Germany for 3 years, and then spent some time with Jocelyn and her family. And I want to celebrate now that my daughter-in-law has a birthday tomorrow, Stephanie, who's married to Andrew. And my oldest granddaughter also has a birthday on Wednesday, and she will be 9.
Ed, do you have a mic?
I'm Ed Van Brunt. First off, I'd like to introduce my daughter, Marilyn Childs, and her husband, Dale Childs, who are visiting this morning. But I warned Gene last Sunday that Dale might come today. Dale is very much involved in the PAC Foundation that Gene was involved with. In fact, I'm told by Dale that he made this picture on the front of the bulletin today. He made many of the pictures there in Dale's book, and I believe you proofread his book. Is that right? Yeah. So anyway, better be careful, Dale, Gene. Dale is watching to be sure you're honest and straightforward.
Thank you, Ed.
Hello, my name is Braden, and I'm celebrating my birthday. It was June 15th, and it was a really great birthday.
And how old are you now? How old are you now? And how old did you turn?
I turned 12.
Congratulations. Marcia?
Hi, we're Marcia and Brian Anderson, and we have 3 celebrations in June for our family. First, our son Bryce, who grew up here in the church, turned 27 on June 3rd. He's living in LA. Our daughter started a new job last week with her freshly minted data science certificate, so very happy about that. She's living in DC, and then we'll celebrate our 32nd wedding anniversary in 11 days in Costa Rica.
And right here.
We are Ray and Martha Phillips. We're visiting you from Albuquerque, New Mexico, actually, Rio Rancho. We're representing 2 churches there. First Congregational UCC Albuquerque and St. Paul's UCC at Rio Rancho. We recently moved there from Maine, where we were active in the UCC church and in the main conference of the UCC. We had to come out because of your program tonight. So we drove out yesterday so we could celebrate, be active with you at the Center United Methodist Church and the action afterwards. We've been busy demonstrating in Santa Fe and Albuquerque and looking for every opportunity we can to cause trouble.
So who's bailing us out tonight if we get arrested?
There he is. There's the hand. Herb Tucker will bail you out. And thank you so much for coming and joining us this morning. And I'm very much looking forward to seeing you this evening as well. So thank you for coming all that way to support families of migrants. Anybody else? Yes, Roy.
Hi, Roy Zebrowski, and Barb and I are happy to be back after a couple of weeks out in East Coast in New Jersey, New York City. But primarily we spent about 10 days with, I would say, 150 of our closest friends. Actually, about 70 of those are some of our closest friends, and building 3 homes for 3 beautiful families in Mine Hill, New Jersey, with Habitat for Humanity. So it was a great week. We had a good time, and the emotion that comes from just giving was manifest greatly.
Thank you, Roy. Michael, can you help Sue out? Hi, Sue.
Hi, Brad.
Are you hiding back there?
I'm hiding.
Okay.
I'm Sue Lefebvre. I just want to mention that our worship leader today, Jean Lefebvre, will be 85 next Sunday.
Are there any other celebrations? Well, I've noticed there's a great lack of standing in our service this morning, so if you would all stand to sing the celebration song with us, it'd be absolutely wonderful. And this is a chance to stretch and clap and do whatever you want to do as long as singing the celebration song.
Celebrate your heart and your spirit. Celebrate your life while you live it. Even when it's hard to do, celebrate the best of you. Celebrate your name and your vision. Celebrate the love you've been given. Cherish all that you've been through. Celebrate the best of you. And you may be seated.
Is this still on? Yes, it is. Great. When I was 16 years old, I joined an organization that really changed perspective for my life. It was a club at North Phoenix High School, and they called themselves the Kachinas in honor of the Hopi spiritual beings who dwell in the San Francisco Peak area, as you may know. And these boys felt the same draw to the mountains that the Hopi Kachinas did, they thought. So a man moved to Phoenix who was an expert rock climber. In fact, he was a professional guide in the Tetons in Wyoming. And he took some 8th grade boys and taught them how to climb mountains and how to do it the right way, the safe way. And that group was called the Kachinas. It was also Explorer Post 1 in Phoenix. Unlike the other Explorer posts, we weren't spending our time with merit badges, but hiking and climbing mountains. So it became the unique Explorer post in the United States with that kind of activity. It also happened to be the first organized climbing group in Arizona with this little group of boys. So they learned a lot, and they learned pretty fast. He was a really excellent teacher, and they enjoyed a new sport for them, which had to do with leaping across rocks and rappelling down and having a good time playing on the mountains, but doing it while they were safe at the same time. So they, with the permission of their parents, were able to do some astounding things. These are now young people that were in their freshman and sophomore years of high school. They went to Mexico, climbed the volcanoes. They climbed in Canada, in Wyoming, in Colorado, and New Mexico, and California, and all over the place in those two or 3 years that they were part of the organization. So when the organization was planning a big outing one year, they wanted to go back where Ray had been the professional guide, to the Tetons in Wyoming. I don't know if you know the Tetons, but they, I think, are the most dramatic and perhaps the most beautiful mountains in the United States. But they're dangerous, and these boys decided that they would be climbers on the Tetons early in the year, which means late in the spring, when the snow is still melting. And they managed to climb every one of the high Teton mountains until they made an extra trip one day. 2 of the boys climbed one of the peaks, and one of them was standing 15 feet from the edge of the cliff when the whole side gave way, and he died in the fall. His name was Win Aiken. He was very much loved by family at his high school and the community. So that was a great shock for these boys, and they decided that they would continue to climb, feeling that that's what Win wanted them to do, and they would do it in his name. But it was shocking for them to go through that experience, as you can imagine. And so the passion with which they were able to climb after that was never the same. They continued the organization and recruited new people like me and some of my friends. And we joined the organization about a year and a half after Wen's death. And by that time, some of the shock had worn off, and the boys who were friends of his and climbers with him had gone off to college. So we learned to climb without that kind of pall hanging over us. And it was a great sport for us. Occasionally, we let girls come. This was something different and new. And it was our way of checking them out. That was strange, isn't it? There's a picture in here on the screen by now. We just went past it. There's a picture of Sue rappelling down off of a rock from way up on the mountain, on Camelback Mountain. Now, she passed the test. Why, I don't know what she did, but it was great. Now this is, when I was in the Kachinas, one of the tests they had for me was to climb this cliff on Camelback, which is called Suicide. An ominous name. And you can make out a couple of bodies up here if you look very carefully. They're very small because that's a very high, hundreds of foot cliff. Very difficult to climb. And the leader of the climb was not feeling well that day. So he said, well, Gene, you take over and you climb this. And I was only on my third climb. So I, not knowing what else to do, took the lead and tried to get over this overhang over the rock, which proved to be impossible for me. I fell, and the safety rope caught me. And they encouraged me to try again. So I climbed back up to where the climber that holding my safety rope was, went back over and tried again and fell again. And I was through by that time, but they called me over and said, we've got a problem because you're still hooked into the mountain and the safety rope, and we can't go any further with you hooked into the mountain that way. So you need to go up there, Gene, and jump off the cliff. Unhook your carabiner and jump. And now, one of the least intelligent things I've done in my life was to follow their directions and to jump off into space with it. It was about a month later when I quit having nightmares. It's a big, heavy experience for us. The most intense experiences that I had while we were in that organization was some expeditions that we went on. One of them was to Baja, California, and we were trying to climb or be the first people to climb the highest mountain in Baja. We didn't have great preparations for that, but we did have a state highway map that showed more or less where the mountain was. And we wound up a week hiking to and from the mountain over some pretty rough trails. And when we got to the peak, and the peak actually was broken into three, so the highest one was the one furthest from us, and it was about 10,000 feet elevation from the Sea of Cortez below it. And so we ran out of water and food and any kind of help by the time we got to the last peak. And it became, sun came down on us, and we realized that if we had a serious injury, we were on our own, that there were no safety groups there, and no one could rescue us. So we decided to wait another time to do that peak again. So we satisfied our egos by claiming the second highest peak and saying that's good enough. The hardest part of that experience in the Cachinas for me was in a canyon in central Mexico in the Sierra Madre Mountains. It's called La Barranca del Cobre. And it got big publicity in 1950 when I was in the Cachinas by Life magazine, I think it was a national magazine that made a huge spread. The cover page and the inside were filled with stories about the Barranca. The Barranca being called the Grand Canyon of Mexico, that it was as deep and wide and huge as the Grand Canyon. But it had more than that going for it. According to writers of the magazine, there were Indian people who hid from outsiders and didn't like them, and sometimes would appear behind trees with their bows and arrows and made threatening gestures to keep you out of that area. So our leaders for our group, boys, decided that would be a good place to go. Life magazine expedition had spent about $10,000 putting their expedition together. We had about $1,000, and we put together an expedition to the Barranca. And we weren't as prepared as we could have been. So when we got to the canyon, we were able to get the same guide that the Life magazine had gotten, and same mule skinner who was coming with us, 2 burros and a mule, and these 2 guides. And we took off to go to the Barranca. We still didn't have maps. We couldn't find any of the canyon at that time, even though we searched in Mexico as well. But the Barranca was still inaccessible for most people. And I don't know what, maybe there were 1 or 2 other groups that had come in from the side where we were coming, from the west. But this is the Barranca, and it turned out to be not 1 canyon, but 5 canyons. And this one is called Urique. And down at the bottom of this canyon, there is a village that's quite old that became a silver mining center. It took us several days to get there, but we had a problem with our food. A nutritionist in Phoenix had convinced the boys who were doing the planning that all we needed for the food for our trip was Roman ration, the same food that the Roman army had used to conquer Gaul. And he convinced them that wheat was all we needed. So we had 100 pounds of wheat. And we did have about 50 pounds of beans and some cheese. And we started off our expedition thinking, well, we'll find food along the way or we'll buy it. Well, there wasn't a whole lot for sale, sparse country we were in. And we ran through the food, and the wheat tasted just god-awful. It was really horrible. So it was an act of courage to eat that wheat over and over again. We didn't have the best equipment. Our packs were, because of the climbing gear and some movie gear that we were packing along so that we could make a film for the Arizona State Fair. I averaged about 70 pounds for each of the packs. So we were hiking up and down from jungle elevation to 10,000 feet. It was rainy season, so we had to stay up on the ridges, and we came to rivers that had to be crossed by waiting until somebody came by with a rowboat. We could talk them into taking us across. And we had some problems with illness along the way. Everyone got dysentery, and the medicine that we had taken along with had been rolled over on by the burro, packing it. So the one medicine we really needed for dysentery was gone, broken and gone. So as we went, we encountered some bad weather over and over again up on rainy season, but we didn't have any anything adequate to keep us dry either. So just kind of all the way around, we had a wonderful preparations for the trip. So we wound up hiking to and from about 300 miles, and we came back with pictures of the village and the canyon and the silver mining. The town was left with just a few houses. A couple of them were two-story, and the pictures that we saw later showed long strings of burros that they were using to carry silver ore out of the valley. And they were using ore machines that were run by the force of the river to crush the ore. But the village didn't last too long. And when we came into the village, there were two adults only that we saw, two old men. And they came toward us, and they, one of them said he was the mayor, and the other said he was the chief of police. And whatever they wanted, we were fine with. And we spent a day with them trying to get our act together to be able to get out of the canyon, because we still faced about 8 days trip to get out. But by then, one of the boys was so sick that he couldn't carry any weight at all. And then the second one came down, so we wound up with weight from boys who who were too sick to carry that any further. So we wound up hiking out of that canyon, and I couldn't remember several days of that canyon from the day we got out of it until I came across a diary in writing this book that was published in the Tucson newspaper by one of the boys had recorded some of the trip. And that's the first I saw a record of some of those days that we hiked out. And it's just as well. It was a nightmare for most of us. We came out of the canyon earlier than the people that sent us off expected it to be another 2 weeks maybe before we got out of there. But we came out, and we were exhausted and sick, and we learned some things. We learned about the fact that we could reach limits that we thought we could not. We came to know what it was to reach inside yourself just to survive and to be able to go on in some way. We also reached another learning on the way, which is we didn't need to do it again. Didn't need to prove anything after that. Felt like we'd proved anything we wanted to in terms of endurance and hiking. So we abandoned the sport of hiking after the camp, and went off to college and graduate school. And then the second part of this story is what happened when we came back 20 years later, and we'll show you that in a few minutes. But we'll continue the worship in between. Isn't that tricky?
God, help us receive gifts from creation. Amen.
The word about life today comes from Deuteronomy, book 31, verse 6. Be strong and good of courage. Do not fear nor be afraid of them, for the Lord your God goes with you. God will never leave you nor forsake you.
So it's 20 years later. Is that still on?
Okay?
Got it? Yeah. Thanks.
Don't thank me yet.
Okay.
Are we good?
Are we good? Okay. All right. It's 20 years later, and some of us are back in Phoenix after practicing our careers elsewhere. And we started an organization, and it was for boys and girls, and it was a high school age, and it called Challenge. And that program was located at Central High School because that's where some of our children went to school. So we needed someone to direct that, and Dale Childs drew the short straw on that. And we put together a program after experimenting some with Prescott College that wound up to be 20, 25 young people with advisors. And each month they would go to a different outdoor experience. So once a month they were into climbing, desert survival, caving, Salt River rafting, a whole series of things. And the idea was an idea that really struck us while we were doing the training with Prescott College. We had the experience of having these young people go with the college for a day of climbing and then 2 days on the lower part of the Grand Canyon. And when they came out, it was great. But not long after that, our youth group was caroling at a health center near St. Joseph's Hospital, and they got stuck in an elevator. About 15 or 20 of them were packed into an elevator, and they had this much space where they could talk to someone through the openings. And the first tries for some calls to the emergency numbers that were on the walls there didn't bring any help. So they wound up calling 911, and eventually the firemen came. And the firemen came in through the ceiling of the elevator, and they had on masks and all their fire regalia, and the uncomfortableness that the young people had been experiencing just skyrocketed. So we wound up with several of them we had to take over to St. Joe's Hospital across the street to deal with the stress that they'd come under from panicking for all those people packed into a space, and then the sight of these people coming with safety equipment to pull them out. And one of our friends was a minister with me, and he was a psychologist. And he met with us with our youth group one night, and he had not been on the trip with us down with Prescott College, but he asked, how many of you that were in the elevator that day were on that Prescott College trip? And some of them held up their hands. And then he said to the rest of them, and you weren't on that trip? And then how many of you are really experienced some stress on the elevator? And the hands went up, and none of the hands of the young people that have been with Prescott College went up. And this is the experience that groups were having that were working with youth all over the country, which was that if you have put people in a situation where they are challenged, where it takes real courage for them, they're likely to be able to carry that experience in a different way into something else, into another experience in their life, maybe many experiences. That started a whole series of programs throughout the country that were based on Outward Bound. The challenge was like that, maybe not as intense as Outward Bound, but we were putting young people in different situations each month so that you might feel pretty comfortable down in a cave for 6 hours or so, but the next experience you might be climbing a mountain, or the next experience running a river or cross-country skiing. We found a way to challenge you, and every one of the young people that was involved. So the question was, when you encounter a really rough situation, where do you go for that substance that's in you to get you through that kind of experience? And the answer was, you go inside, you find courage inside of you. But what became really obvious to us after doing that for a year or so was that the basis for the strength of the courage of a group or the individuals in that group was the group itself. Those who were in groups that had bonded, been through some experiences together, were much better at handling stressful situations. And you could move them from one stressful situation to another, and they still would maintain that strength that had been with that group that they were with. And even if you changed groups after that, the group experience carried on. We live in a situation where there's a great deal of anxiety in our society and in our personal worlds these days. The whole country seems a high anxiety level. And the question is, where do we go and where do we find courage in those kind of scenes? And our answer to that, I think, is that you build communities of faith. And you build communities where people are willing to risk something that's not comfortable for them, but not so unsafe that they feel threatened. And you put together experiences and communities that will be strong enough to get through that stress. So we wind up in churches, communities of faith, with encouraging people sometimes to take risk. It's because the risk itself is part of the building of the courage. You take the risk, and from what happens in the risk, you feel rewarded, you feel courageous because of it, and you wind up stronger. We're in a community today where we are facing across the country a scene we haven't seen in quite a while for the church, which is we've got churches losing members in great numbers. Even the evangelical super churches are experiencing that. We're in a point in culture when people are attending churches in smaller numbers, and they're giving to churches in smaller amounts. So what do you do in a situation like that? Typically, congregations that I talk to are just pining for the days in the past when they had lots of young families in their church. And they just say, we just need young people, we just need young families especially. And they find they're not coming. And they're not sure what to do about that. And that's the cycle that's going on across the country right now. Individual church members often don't feel it that way. They think it's personal to their churches, but it's culture-wide. And in a situation like that, the experience of churches and communities of faith of all kinds, historically is, you go to communities where there's some strength, where there's some toughness, or where there's some risk involved, and they're much more able to handle those scenes to come through periods of time when the faith is not as popular culturally. There's one of the great theologians of the 20th century was by the name of Karl Barth, and he lived in Germany, in West Germany, during the Cold War, and a pastor in East Germany, communist-controlled East Germany, wrote him and said, "What am I supposed to do? I'm a pastor of a Christian church here, and few people feel courageous enough to come to church, and they set aside their faith because there's too much risk involved. And what am I supposed to do?" And Barth's reply to that was, he just visited America, and he said, "I came back with all these scenes in my head of all the people pouring into the churches," which was true in the 1950s and 60s in America. We experienced great numbers of people coming to church, and they had great social life, lots of potlucks, he said, and there was a great feeling about the numbers of people. But what you're doing in East Germany with a smaller group of people for whom faith is costly, it's expensive because you take risk in doing it, and that's where the central part of your faith is. You're doing the real work of the church in the situation you're in, even though it's difficult. And that's going to help the whole church get through this kind of period. I think Bart was right. I think that's the kind of period of time we're in now, so that when we take on an issue, if it's homeless people, if it's migrants, it's scenes like that, we're likely to encounter more resistance from people in control than we've been in the past. And we're likely to experience more faith through those experiences as we feel called to risk more and to put our faith in a scene where it's acted out, where people can see it, and where we're exposed, but where it's worth something. And this is the call that we were trying to act out with these young people in a less religious way, but it's the task of faith communities to do this work. And we've, in my opinion, this is where the church is, and the churches that are going to survive this are going to be the churches that can pull it together even if the numbers are smaller and are willing to take the risk and stand for the faith in the midst of this kind of society. So that's the word for today. Amen.